Not too long ago, you might have spotted a list on WhatCulture hosted by the lovely Jules about video games that punish you for being a bad dude. Well, sometimes video games punish you for being a good guy too. They sure do keep us guessing. In this list, we're tucking into the video games that let you choose what seemed to be a no-brainer good moral choice, only to pull the rug out from under you and punish you for it. Whether the game offered you a choice and it turned out the unethical option was less damaging, or you were pushed into a corner where the ethical choice was clear but would cause you a crazy amount of trauma, there was nothing easy about these dilemmas. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 video games that punish you for making the ethical choice. Number 10, Vampire. Don't Nod released action role-playing game Vampire in 2018, where, and this should come as no surprise, you play as a vampire. Of course, being a vampire, you're met with an ethical conundrum right off the bat, and Vampire lets you choose if you want to be a bad guy or a good guy. You don't have to kill innocents, but not doing so leaves you pretty much incapable of leveling up. If you aren't consuming human blood and killing civilians, you'll miss out on vital experience points, vampiric powers, and both active and passive skills, making combat much more difficult. It's also a hell of a lot more fun to become an uber-powerful vampire via the means of being unethical, so that's another punishment in and of itself. On the upside, you will have an easier time maintaining Reed's cover as a doctor if you aren't running around town doing murders, but on the downside, pretty much everything else. Number 9, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. There are a lot of choices you can make in The Witcher 3 which seem like the right thing to do and then end up being the super wrong thing to do. This happens over and over again, but surely the most brutal of these situations concerns the ultimate fate of your ward Ciri. You spend a huge portion of the game looking for her, and then when you do, the game is running a set of checks in the background to see how you treat her, which actually has life or death consequences. The kicker here is that to keep Ciri alive, you actually have to let her maintain her independence and go off and do her own thing, which is kind of hard because as Geralt, you sort of just want to be overprotective and make sure nothing can hurt her. If you try to solve all her problems for her, protect her from the Emperor by encouraging her not to go, or treating her too much like a child by insisting you'll accompany her wherever she goes, she actually won't feel capable during the final battle. These are little decisions you'll be making the whole game, which might feel like the right thing to do because she's already been through so much and you can finally protect her, but they'll actually lead to her death. And there's nothing quite like a 150-hour game leading to the death of a beloved character as a punishment for being nice. Number 8, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. Often when we talk about being a good guy or a bad guy in video games, the obvious references are Mass Effect's Paragon and Renegade options and Star Wars Light Side and Dark Side. It stands to reason then that being an ethical goody two-shoes in Star Wars is just a matter of aiding the downtrodden, being nice to everybody, and giving to the poor. Not so in the case of Knights of the Old Republic 2, in which Murder Granny Kreia gives you a talking to on the dangers of blind altruism. A refugee in Nar Shaddaa asks for a few credits, and you do so because it's only 5 credits after all. Immediately, Kreia tells you giving him what he's not earned is like pouring sand into his hands, and a scene plays out where the very same refugee is beaten and robbed due to having the money you just gave him. She concludes with, "Be careful of charity and kindness, lest you do more harm with open hands than with a clenched fist." Kreia also spends the entire game having a go at you, and you'll lose influence with her if you do charitable things for no particular reason. So if you want to be a good guy, I hope you like lectures. Number 7, Until Dawn. Until Dawn is a game where you can get everybody killed, so it's fair enough you'd want to stay on your toes and perhaps question whether the ethical choice is the right one. Now, it might not be the right choice to follow the voice of your friend crying out for help down a creepy dark tunnel, but she is doing a lot of crying out for you, so it's certainly the ethical thing to do. If you've already read the passage you can find in-game saying the game's main antagonist, the Wendigo, can imitate voices, or you found the lost totem that shows Ashley's head getting ripped off, this would be a very silly thing to do. But you do hear your friend calling out for help, so off you go. Be a good guy. Being the ethical bastion of good I know you are, you'll venture down that sinister hallway just in case it turns out your friend is in fact in danger. She isn't, and you're now dead, but I respect you for trying. Number 6, Frostpunk. These next 2 games are actually both made by the same developer, 11-Bit Studios. So when it comes to ensuring you have to stay in the ethical grey realm to succeed lest you be punished, they're kind of the experts. Frostpunk is a 2018 survival game where you'll have to make some pretty brutal choices to keep your city functioning and your people alive. Given this is a cutthroat strategy game where climate change has pushed humanity to its limits, trying to make all of the ethical choices will run your city into the ground very quickly. The stakes and challenges are incredibly high, and keeping your citizens fed, warm, and content is a constant battle. On top of that, you're called on to establish laws as the leader of the city, and some of these really go places. For example, you can build a cemetery, which is a good and ethical thing to do, but burials will take time away from your workers, which already have limited daytime work hours. You can also make a law that signs off on child labor, which adds to the number of people working in the city, but obviously is not an ethical choice at all. If that wasn't hard enough, you're met with personal requests too, where meeting someone's individual needs might hurt everybody else. You'll have a far easier path through the game being a tyrant, but sleeping at night might be tricky. Number 5, This War of Mine. There's a papers, please genre of game that seems like it just wants you to be sad, and This War of Mine absolutely fits into that bucket. This War of Mine is a strategy survival game where you'll have to make difficult choices for a group of civilians hiding out in a fictional city under siege. You'll need to maintain the group's health, hunger, and mood, and deal with encounters with other NPC survivors. This is where things get tricky. Well, trickier. Outsiders will ask for food and medicine, and it's up to you to help them if you want, or you can rob or kill them. Of course, the ethical thing would be to help your fellow man, but giving away your extremely scarce supplies is going to make things incredibly difficult for you in-game and for the survivability of your group. If for some reason that doesn't already sound like a painful ethical nightmare to you, you can always grab the Little Ones DLC. This expansion adds a child survivor who can't help to shelter initially or defend themselves, but needs constant attention, is prone to depression, and needs to be taught to help out with various chores over time. It's a losing battle trying to keep everyone safe and happy the entire time, but making the ethical choices in this instance will often make things far more dire. Number 4, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. When Assassin's Creed Odyssey was set up to be the first game in the series that would actually let you make meaningful decisions that have consequences, Ubisoft did not do things by half measures. They also seem to have a pretty fun time trolling you, as one of the earliest decisions where a no-brainer good guy move seems to be the right call actually results in devastating consequences. The Blood Fever quest kicks off very early when you're still on Kefalonia. You encounter a plague-ridden family, including small children, and you either defend them from those intent on killing them to stop the spread, or allow them to be executed. Now, to be fair, this is an ethical conundrum. Leaving the family alive could put others at risk of catching the plague, but murdering them in cold blood seems inexcusably wrong. If you make the kinder choice in the interim and spare the family their violent fate, you actually end up dooming the entire island. If you do make the trip back later in the game, you'll find that the entire island has been devastated by the plague and many people have died, so that's kind of an oops on your part. Number 3, Tyranny. Tyranny is an RPG from Obsidian Entertainment that came out in 2016, and it's probably the strongest contender for a game that will absolutely screw you over for trying to be nice. Or, for the purposes of our list, punish you for making the ethical choice. As the name implies, this is not a game about being nice. You're literally working for an evil empire and trying to maintain control over the people you've conquered the best way you know how. Your choices here range from lawful evil to chaotic neutral, but you'll be erring closer to doing what's best for you and your superiors rather than just going around handing out money and picking all the blue options. You can support your tyrannical leader, be a different kind of evil, or decide you only care about yourself. But not leaning into one of the more evil routes is going to be more difficult and honestly less fun. If you start feeling too bad, you can always pull the, hey man, I just work here logic. So what are you waiting for? Go on over to that dark side. Number 2, Bloodborne. It shouldn't come as a great surprise that Bloodborne is a brutal game with a brutal game world that offers you brutal consequences for any of your in-game choices, but just in case it does, you've been warned. If you try and save all the friendly NPCs you meet out and about in the nasty game world, you'll get them all killed. It doesn't matter if you send them all to Yosefka's clinic or the chapel, you'll more than likely lead most of them to their untimely deaths. The caveat to this is if you send the suspicious beggar from the Forbidden Woods to Yosefka's clinic. Do this and you'll still get the guy killed, but since he's a cannibal, you won't let him loose on the rest of your townies. Send anybody to the clinic and Yosefka will experiment on them and kill them horribly. Send the beggar to the chapel and he'll systematically kill off everybody there. Also horribly. To be fair though, when you do meet this particular NPC, he is munching on a kid's corpse, so that one's kind of on you. Number 1, A Plague Tale Requiem. Enormous spoiler warning for you here. I have to tell you what happens at the very end of A Plague Tale Requiem, which is the second game in the Plague Tale series. So if you don't want to know what happens, that's okay. Just meet me over at the next video. But for everybody else, let's talk about this absolutely horrible ethical choice. A Plague Tale Requiem is the hotly anticipated 2022 follow-up to the critically acclaimed A Plague Tale Innocence, and it ends on a hell of a note. After spending 2 games doing your best to stave off the macular infection from overwhelming Amicia's little brother Hugo, an extremely unexpected thing happens, and it turns out you're simply too late. Believing his sister to be dead, tiny little Hugo gives himself over to the aggressive genetic condition, becoming entirely possessed by it. You're left with a couple of options, and both of them are bad. You can walk away from the shell of your little brother, now entirely merged with macula, dooming the world to be destroyed by rats, or you can kill him off with your sling, which is the ethical choice, and one of the worst things a video game has asked me to do in 2022 and probably ever. Sure, if you don't do it, Lucas will do it for you, but if that's not a punishment, I don't know what is. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other times that video games have punished you for making the ethical choice. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to what's here for plenty more gaming goodness.